Rising star. This guy is in like 4 movies between August and December. Keep your eyes on him. I think he's fantastic, playing the shifty and the shady Robert Dudley, Mr. Joe Alwyn. And playing Mary Stewart, aka Mary Queen of Scots, the great Saoirse Ronan. Looks like we have 2 microphones. So 2 of you will have to share. Saoirse, let me start off with you. What? Talk about the moment when you realized that you wanted to play Mary. What was it? Was it a script? Did you grow up knowing about Mary? What was the moment that you realized this is someone who I want to become?
So I signed up to. Hello, by the way. Thanks for coming to the screening. I signed up to Mary when I was about 18, so about 6 years ago. And it's Working Title who produced it, and I've been working with Tim and Eric since I was about 12, on and off. And they have been trying to get the film made for years and years and years. And it's a tough story to tell. There's so much sort of to it, and there's so much that we even had to leave out America, because so much happened to this woman in her 42 years. And so initially it was just a concept and it was an idea that was in development. So I signed on really before there was like a proper script, and they didn't have a director, they didn't have anyone else attached. And I just stayed with it for years, because I think initially what I loved more than anything else and what really, really excited me was the fact that I would get a chance to play a Celtic queen. And that's something that we haven't really seen that much. We've seen, there's been so much, so many amazing things made about English monarchy and French and Russian, things like that, but nothing really about Celtic rulers, certainly not female. So I was very excited about that, and the Irish history and Scottish history kind of mirror each other, especially around that time. So I was very drawn to the country, very drawn to their history.
What did you sort of connect with the most in terms of when you were researching her and learning more about her, and portraying her sort of honestly and with authenticity? What did you find the most relatable to her in terms of finding her?
Well, I mean, all of us worked with Wayne McGregor, who is this really incredible choreographer based in the UK. He directed the Royal Ballet. He did a TED Talk. He's very impressive. And he was probably my way into the character emotionally, actually. The physicality and how she moved and how she presented herself was how I sort of connected to her and reached her, I think. But as a character and as a person, I think once I started to research her more as we got closer to actually shooting and we started to rehearse, I think the fact that she was this young person who was thrown into, the lion's den and was suddenly had so much expectation resting on her and so much responsibility that she didn't necessarily ask for, I could kind of, in a much less important way, tap into that thing of like, oh, when we do this or when we go and make a film or whatever, it's another side to yourself that you need to tap into, and with that comes joy and exhilaration and all that, but it also comes with doubts and insecurity and all of that. And getting the chance to sort of explore that with her was very exciting.
What about you, Joe? Robert Dudley. This guy. He's got a long history about him. When he was young, he was commissioned to die, and then he kind of got out of that somehow, and then kind of got in with Elizabeth. And then was beside her for a long time. Sort of, what was your access point to him?
What I found interesting and tried to kind of latch onto was compared to the other men. I suppose in a way he's a bit of an outsider, in the sense that others act, not that he doesn't necessarily have an agenda or is unable to have an agenda, but the other male characters are actively and kind of obviously working off an agenda of wanting things politically or in terms of power, and he, I thought, was interesting because of his love and loyalty to Elizabeth, and I suppose in some ways is kind of the one male character who manages or tries to sustain the idea of true romantic love compared to the other men in the film. And I liked his the fact that he had known Elizabeth for years as a child, and they'd even been in the tower at the same time together. There was an idea that they had a connection that predated her becoming a queen, and that sense of loyalty, I thought, was an interesting thing.
You know, you speak about love, and I feel like this was a time that was kind of devoid of love. I mean, did people love back then?
In a different way.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I feel like, well, who knows about Dudley and Elizabeth? There's only so much you can obviously know, but I feel like there really was like a true tender relationship, at least in this depiction. I feel that's the avenue that it's gone down. Who knows what happened in bed?
Well, and she wanted him to marry Mary.
Yeah.
You know, what do you think? And he was like, "No, I'm good." But what do you think would have happened if it went that way? I'm curious to hear both of you speak about that.
Interesting remake.
Would have been great. Yeah, I think he would have obviously done it, and sacrificed himself for Elizabeth in doing that. I don't know how it would have gone.
Yeah, I mean, I think like marriage and love were very separate things back then. Marriage was a political move, even in the same way like pregnancy was. So it was seen as like a way to further your either claim to the throne or just success as a monarch or a ruler or lord or whatever. I mean, I don't know. I suppose the reason why Elizabeth wanted Dudley and Mary to marry was so that she would essentially have control over Mary, and it would be a way to sort of appease Mary and give her somewhat of what she wanted, but without handing over the crown. But as you saw, Mary kind of saw through that. But I don't know. I mean, maybe if they had sort of created this weird menage a trois thing, it would have been a more peaceful kingdom. I don't know. Dudley certainly would have been very satisfied. But yeah, I think Mary could sort of see right through that. So.
You know, I'd be curious. I want to talk to you about the scene with Margot towards the end of the film. I love films where you have these two powerhouse performances, but you never see them in the same room together until the end. And I think that moment when you're sort of coming through the curtains, I feel like you're peeling back the layers of that relationship. And when those two women meet, it's at the rawest form of that relationship, and you find two women who just kind of want to love each other. Yeah. And that seems like the only moment where they're there, but it's impossible for them to love each other. I'm just curious about you filming that scene, where it was in the production.
So Margot and Joe and Guy and everyone in the English course shot for the first like, three or 4 weeks, and the Scots didn't really get involved yet, so we hadn't shot our bit yet. And I did a few days here and there just when we were on the same location. But Margot and I had agreed. I'd never done this before. I never kind of felt the need to do it, but in this case I kind of thought, I think this would be quite a fun experiment. We decided to stay separate from each other, and we rehearsed our scene for like a couple of hours one day, but I didn't know what Margot was going to look like as Elizabeth. She didn't know what I was going to look like as Mary. We only had what was in our head. And I know Margot's even said to me that was sort of there's something very powerful about having this sort of ghost over your shoulder that you can only sort of paint them out in your imagination, and you kind of have nothing else to draw from. And so we first saw each other for the first time while we were shooting the scene. So we shot the first half of it where we don't see each other. We did all that, stayed separate, had our lunch separately, stayed apart, still didn't know what the other one looked like. Even when we were in hair and makeup, we were in different parts of the truck. And when I pulled down the sheet, they had 2 cameras that shot our close-ups simultaneously. And so what you see, the reaction is Saoirse and Margot going, "Oh, that's what you look like. That's what Jenny Sharkar did to you." And it was this really amazing, like, emotional, loaded moment for both of us as people who were playing these characters, but also just as 2 actors who, were delighted to get to work together and had this one scene, and it's the biggest scene for both of us in the film, and it was her very last day of the shoot, and it was my very first day. Yeah, so she was coming to the end of this really intense experience where she had been up at like 3 a.m. early morning getting her prosthetics on, and I was about to start a film I'd waited 6 years to do. So it was so emotional, and so I remember after we did the first take, we were just sort of shaken, and we like wouldn't let go of each other because we had waited so long to see one another. So it was amazing.
I mean, and what do you think about that read on these 2 women? And Joe, I'd like to hear you speak to this too. Do you feel like they wanted to just love each other? Do you feel like that there was, in terms of love being in this movie, do you feel like the real love was between the 2 of them? They just couldn't access it properly?
I mean, I don't know if it was love as much as it was. I think they wanted to have the opportunity to be able to become close to one another. But I think they just really had an understanding of the other one's situation in a way that nobody else really did. Even if it was another male ruler, they didn't have to go through what the woman did, which was, I think more than anything what kind of blows my mind is that as soon as either of them, if they had a child, their power was gone and it was given to this baby, which is kind of insane, but that was essentially their role at the end of the day. And so power and duty was something that was really sacred and precious to both of them. And in that scene with with Mary Fleming, she says, "Just come away with us," and she's like, "You don't get it. Nobody else gets it except her." And so I think Mary was really desperate to have that affinity with her and to have some sort of a relationship. And I think she also knew that, because Mary was very, very charismatic and kind of knew how to work a room. And I think she knew that as soon as she got in the room with Elizabeth, once she could talk to her and they could hash it out together, they'd be cool. And I think that's probably why they were kept apart. But I think they really yearned for that throughout their reign.
Yeah, and I don't believe they say in the movie, but Mary was in prison for 19 years.
Yeah, 20. I think it was 26 years or something.
Which is
even longer,
crazy.
Yeah.
And then they kind of create this whole plot to try to get her to say that she'll be part of this assassination attempt on Elizabeth. And then she goes to trial. They don't give her a lawyer. They don't let her see any of the evidence.
And had no attorney.
No. No. Joe, go ahead.
No, that's it.
What was the most sort of fascinating thing you learned about, in making this movie, about this period of time, about Robert Dudley, about what was happening then? I mean, what was, maybe your biggest takeaway, but also sort of why now? Why is right now an important time to tell the story?
I think in terms of a film, it's refreshing to see a film that's led by 2 strong female performances, completely fully drawn, well-crafted, complex women characters leading the film. I think it's also interesting to think about how the kind of, not whims, that sounds kind of too light about it, but about how the whims of a few people or a few men in court trying to pour poison or whatever it is into the Queen's ear, or the Queen's feelings can influence the fate of the nation and start wars, and that is something that's always relevant and is relevant at the moment. How decisions of the few, but alter everything. So it was timely in that sense, I suppose. What was the rest of the question?
No, I think you're exactly right. You know, and James, interestingly enough, he 13 months old, he becomes King of Scots. But it was during his reign that sort of literature thrived, and William Shakespeare came about. So I thought that was very interesting. Is there a part of her history, Saoirse, that is not in this movie that you found very fascinating?
I mean, her time spent in France was fascinating. Her mother was also an incredible woman, Mary of Guise. Like, she held the fort for 19 years while Mary was away. She had to leave Scotland because of the rough wooing throughout Scotland by Henry down south. And so Mary of Guise sent her off to France to be with her relatives and the king, in hope that she would marry the Dauphin, which she did. And so like Catherine de Medici was with them at that time, and she was horrible, and she hated Mary, and Mary like stole all of our thunder and all of that. And that's really fascinating. And then also, like, this is what I mean, we couldn't have made a film of everything, because then there's like the 19 or 20 years or whatever it was where she was under house arrest, and you know, she was kept in really confined spaces and wasn't allowed to exercise, and her health really deteriorated, and because she was so wonderful, she became friends with like her captives, and they loved her, and as soon as she would get close to people, they'd move her around again. She stayed in like 20 different houses during house arrest, and some of them were damp and cold and dark, and just it was kind of awful. So there's so much that you could make a film about. But I think her mother, like we years ago when I had signed up to it, we went and we did a recce up in Scotland, and we went to the National Museum of Scotland in Edinburgh, and we had these two Scottish nationalists after hours showing us around this amazing exhibit they had done on Mary, and they said, they were like, I mean, you know, Mary's great and all that sort of stuff, but Mary of Guise, that's your story, that's what you want to do. And they were so, they had so much respect for her, so yeah.
No, I've been just reading too after seeing this movie, and I encourage everybody to just read a little bit more. I saw a bunch of different stories. There's so many stories back then. Do we have questions? Does anybody have any questions? Yes, sir. All the way up there in the corner.
Thank you for your beautiful performances, both of you. I'm really interested in knowing how far you reached into Irish history to find your character. You spoke about it, but how much of it informs this fierce unwillingness to give up?
Yeah, well, I think it's exactly that sort of really intrigued me to begin with, because there's such a similar sense of fight and rebellion and fire and all that sort of stuff that I think both the nations really hold. And I felt very, very connected to the story because of that. And I think we've had incredible warrior queens like Queen Maeve and stuff like that in our history, and they were these wonderful, really powerful, fiery women. And in general, Irish women are very fiery and very feisty. I'm not, but the opposite. But and the Scots tend to have that as well, and I think it just comes from this sort of like unwillingness to give up, as you say, and you know, in the same way Elizabeth and Mary felt an affinity for one another, I sort of feel that with Scotland and the Scots as well, and I think a lot of them do with us too. So just emotionally it felt right to play someone like her, you know. Yeah.
Yes, wonderful performances, and I was wondering if, along this line with the history that you were doing it in Scotland, did you get some of that out of, since you were using some real sets of real places, to kind of also get the characters?
Yeah, definitely. Did you shoot in Scotland or really?
One scene that we had when I get sent up to marry her was on set. So I never went up there for that part. But we shot bits and pieces in old, I can't remember the name of the houses now, but it does just. Yeah. We were there at one point. Yeah. But it does make such a difference instead of being on like a soundstage to actually be in these places that have that sense of the history and life in them, and in whatever way it does kind of seep into to some degree. I think it helps.
Yeah, definitely for myself and all the cast that were up in Scotland, it really did kind of, well, it did for me anyway. It informed the role and the performance of me for sure, because like Mary loved being outdoors. She was sort of a bit wild and just like would go out and ride horses and do falconry and hunt, and she was a bit of a lad, I think. And so it was really important to just feel very in touch with the environment she was in. And I think that so much of Scotland and so much of like Scottish culture is about the land. They're very, very in touch with the land and who owns what and who comes from where, and that's like in their DNA. So to actually be surrounded by that, to be up in the Highlands and to be in Edinburgh and stuff was definitely would surpass any experience you'd have in, as brilliant as Pinewood is, but on the same stage.
Yes.
I'm not sure, did it really happen that they met face to face, or is that not in the movie?
We don't know. There's nothing recorded of them meeting, but it hasn't been proven that they haven't met. Artistic crisis. So yeah, we don't know. They could have met, but nothing was recorded.
We're all hoping that that was true.
I hope
The
it's
best
true.
part.
Yeah,
There's nothing.
I hope so.
I think one of the most memorable scenes of the year, in my opinion. I work for Fandango. I see all the movies. That scene is incredible. I just want to, unfortunately, we are out of time. I just wanted to thank Joe and Saoirse for being here. The movie is Mary Queen of Scots. He will stay in your seat for a minute because he's going to have to get somewhere pretty fast.